and welcome to this session on how leaders continually build their awareness. My name's Anoop, I'm from Think Consulting. We have a number of videos which we'll be releasing on leadership development, so if you'd like to stay up to date, please subscribe to the channel. So today we're going to look at this model called the JOHARI window, and it's actually one of my favourite models when it comes to building awareness. What it will do for us today is answer two key questions. One is, why is building self-awareness so important for leaders? And the other one is, how do we actually do it? How do we actually go through an ongoing process of building our self-awareness? So the JOHARI window, as the name suggests, it's a window. And if you are curious as to where the name comes from, as like I was when I first heard about it, it comes from two psychologists by the name of Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham. So it's just a combination of their first two names, Joseph and Harry, JOHARI. Okay, so this model was originally developed as a communication model, which really makes sense in the area of leadership development because a lot of leadership is about communication and how well we communicate our messages to our teams, followers, but also how do we allow them to communicate back to us. So in any form of communication, what JOHARI or Joseph and Harry are basically suggesting is that there are two perceptions at play. One is how we view ourselves, so me, if you like, and how others view us. And within our communication, there's going to be aspects of our communication which are known to me. So I'm fully aware. For example, I'm fully aware right now of the words that I'm saying. But there also might be aspects of my communication which are unknown to me. So the bits that I don't see in my communication right now, which I don't have conscious awareness of. The same goes for others. When they view me communicating, there will be bits about my communication which are known to them. Again, it could be the words that I'm saying, for example. And there might be aspects that they do not know about. And if you have watched session 1 in the leadership course, we covered this model called the iceberg. So there could be aspects of what's happening below the iceberg, for me right now, for example, which might be unknown to others. For example, you guys viewing this video right now. So when we combine these aspects of communication, so what's known and unknown by others and known and unknown by me, we end up with 4 windows, if you like, in our communication. So we're basically saying here is that there are aspects to me which are completely in the open space. So they're clearly seen by me, they're clearly seen by others who observe me as well. But then there may be aspects which I keep hidden. So they're known to me, but they're unknown to others. So an example right now is that every thought that I'm thinking right now is not necessarily out in that open space. Right? I might have an idea or more of an idea of what's going on for me right there in terms of thoughts, but I'm not necessarily expressing every thought that I have. Now for some reason too, we might decide consciously to keep aspects of ourselves hidden. And we'll get back to that in a second. But there is a hidden area to our experience or people's experience of us, if you like. Over here, there are aspects to us which are known to others, but not necessarily known to me. And we call these our blind spots. So it's referring to the analogy there, if you like, of driving a car. When you look in your rear vision mirror, you might not see everything behind you. There is actually a blind spot in your mirror which you cannot see. So you usually need to turn your head to be able to see it. So right now, there's again aspects of my communication right now which you might be observing, which I have no awareness of right now. And then down here, unknown to others, unknown to me, and I guess it's got the title of the unknown, and we'll explore that in a moment. So how does this work as an awareness tool? So basically, it's highlighting awareness from a couple of levels. First of all, am I aware of everything that I do keep hidden? In this case, we're saying, okay, the known bits, yeah, okay, I'm aware of. What might be examples of that? So for example, have you ever kept an opinion to yourself? You know, I kept it hidden. Maybe you were in a meeting, maybe there was a discussion going on, for whatever reason you decided not to share your opinion. Maybe you thought it wasn't the right thing to say, for example, in which case it might be a good thing to hold it back. But have you ever been in a meeting or been in a conversation with someone where you really did want to say something, but for whatever reason you didn't? You held yourself back, you kept it hidden. Maybe it would have added value to the conversation, or maybe you didn't know how to quite say it, for example, so we kept it hidden. Yeah? Over here, we're basically saying, okay, there are times when people experience something from me that I'm not aware of. So an example of this was actually with a colleague of mine, or he was actually a team member. Back in my days in IT, I managed a team, and I had a team member in there. His name, well, I'll change his name to protect the innocent, but let's call him Con. And Con and I worked together for 18 months, and I honestly thought we had a really good working relationship. But about 18 months into that relationship, we were in a meeting, having a conversation, and then all of a sudden, Con just snapped at me, and he said, "Anoop, will you stop cutting me off?" And I instantly said, "I don't cut you off." And when I reflect back on it, I cut him off in the process of saying that. So it was a classic idea of a blind spot. So what Con was basically saying to me is that, okay, I do cut him off, and I had no awareness whatsoever that I did that. But it's interesting how Con received that experience. So for him, in that experience, I was basically communicating to him that whatever he's got to say right now isn't as important as what I've got to say. Hence, I cut you off and I speak over the top of you. In the unknown area, what could lie here? Well, I guess that is the key question. We don't really know. But if we were to put some words around it, if we were to put some principles perhaps around it, perhaps it's our hidden potential. Perhaps it's skills, talents that we have that we don't realise we have, or maybe it's in the aptitude or the ability to do something. It could also, given that it's not known by others and known by me, it could still be an aspect of myself that just isn't observed. Yeah, but it's there as an undercurrent perhaps. Perhaps it's driving my behaviour. It's a value or it's an emotional pattern perhaps that drives my behaviour. I have no awareness of it, and other people certainly don't have an awareness of it, and they can't understand perhaps why I have that or do that. So that's basically the Johari window in a nutshell. But what we're going to look at now here is, okay, what's the opportunity here? If we ultimately said that the goal here is to increase our open area, and that open area represents our broad awareness. At the very least, we want to increase what's known to us. What's known to us is essentially our awareness. So it's either about moving this line to the right, that middle line, if you like. And in some ways, perhaps, increasing this line here, especially in terms of the open area, to let people see more of who we are. But let's understand why we might have aspects of ourselves that sit in some of these windows. So for example, if we go back to that example of what we keep hidden, if we ask ourselves fundamentally, why do we keep things hidden? Why is it that we do not always express perhaps what we really want to say? What would you say is the key emotion there? And quite often, it's fear. And if we think about this in a leadership context, is it fair to say that there are times when leaders have to be willing to say what other people aren't able to say or aren't willing to say? Right? So if we really want to step into that leadership space, there might be times where, okay, we need to actually consider what I'm keeping hidden. Perhaps I need to find a way to bring it out into the open. And what might that fear be around? Is it fear of other people's reactions? Is it fear that I might be making a career-limiting move if I say something? Is it fear that I don't have the ability to come across clearly, for example, and articulate the message that I really want to get across? So fear could be associated with a number of things here. And when we talk about building our awareness, we're not necessarily saying, let's just express what's going on here. Let's understand the fear that might actually be holding it back. And so that's an aspect of awareness, or our self-awareness, that we're saying is the invitation here to develop, right? So what's actually holding us back, for example, from being able to say what no one else can say or will say perhaps. Over here, if we were to ask ourselves quite simply, well, how do we find out what our blind spots are? So if we really wanted to understand, and again, move this line across, the best way to do it is ask for feedback. And so it's worth asking ourselves, how often do we actually do that? How often do we actually ask people for feedback? A number of organisations have processes available, like 360-degree feedback processes, or it might simply just be a conversation with someone, with a team member, a colleague, your manager, and just saying, hey, I'd really like some feedback on my leadership style. Have you got any for me? But then are there times when we are resistant to feedback? So if you're willing to ask yourself that question right now, are there times when I'm actually resistant to feedback or receiving feedback from others? Again, what would be the reason why? And again, what might be the key emotion at play there again? Chances are there might be an element of fear there again. And so what this model really highlights is it's quite often fear that holds us from being able to develop our awareness. Yeah. So am I worried about what other people will say, for example? Am I worried I'll get too much criticism if I ask for feedback? By the way, this can also work on our strength side. Is it possible that we might have strengths, that there are things that we do really well which we are not aware of because we've never been told or never been acknowledged for it? And again, feedback might actually give you the opportunity to reinforce some strengths, which can certainly help with building confidence as a leader as well. If I go back to my example with Con, so when he snapped at me and said I always cut him off, I had no awareness whatsoever at that point in time that I did that. But my instant reaction was a fearful reaction, right? Because I instantly defended my position and said, no, I don't cut you off, Con, and I actually cut him off in the process of doing so. So that was actually a fairly reflective experience for me, and it did actually take a bit of time for me to process it and actually accept, if you like, that I actually did that there was a part of my leadership style that wasn't very effective, and that was in communicating with other people, especially when we're generating ideas. What was interesting, what I started to learn about myself, so I did cut people off a lot, not only in my work life but in my personal life as well. I realised after that experience, I started to just observe and realise, geez, I actually do this a fair amount of times. I cut people off. So it really started to raise my awareness. For a while there, I had to deal with the pride of accepting that I actually did that, and that was very difficult for me to do, to accept that and acknowledge that. But if I think about that experience and reflect back, what were my choices? I either accept it and grow as a leader, or I don't accept it. I can continue to resist it and not believe that I actually do that. And then what do you think are the ramifications in a work environment if people see me being resistant to feedback? Now, how does it impact the relationship? How does it impact trust, for example? If I'm one of those leaders, and perhaps you've worked with one before too, have you ever worked with a leader perhaps who wasn't willing to admit their mistakes or admit where they could grow? What did it do for your perception of them? And what did it do for your level of respect for them? And what did it do for the relationship? What did it do for trust in that relationship as well? When we talk about great leaders, quite often a key quality of great leaders is humility and a level of humbleness. It's being able to acknowledge that we're human, we make mistakes too, and that's okay, right? But if we were to think about the other choice of not admitting mistakes and holding the perception and communicating the perception that, no, I'm actually perfect the way I am, again, what impact does that have on our teams? So in respects, that's why we say great leaders actually seek feedback. They seek opportunities to grow, and they acknowledge, with humility and humbleness, that I do make mistakes and that I do have opportunities to grow. And by doing that, that builds a stronger relationship, stronger bond with my team. On the other side of this too, if I'm also one of those leaders that don't admit mistakes, what does it then do for my team's preparedness to admit mistakes as well? Are they then going to open up to me if they don't see me open up? And it's quite interesting. I often think leaders continually put out invitations to their teams in the way that they behave. So if I'm open, I'm inviting my team to be open with me. If I'm closed, then perhaps that's the invitation I'm also putting out to them, that they will close as well. Perhaps because they then don't trust my perception of them, right? Because I'm not being open myself. So the key way to really understand our blind spots here is to ask for feedback. And again, perhaps understand if there is any fear around doing that. Okay, what is it? What's the mindset at play there? And where perhaps do I need to challenge my mindset and really see this as an opportunity for growth and continued development as a leader. And that's why we say great leaders continually build awareness. It's not just a goal that we achieve. You know, we don't get to a magical place one day where we say all of a sudden, yep, done, I'm self-aware. Right? If ever we get to that point, well, I believe that fundamentally we will stop growing. We've got to continually seek feedback. We've got to continually build awareness in both areas. So let's turn our attention to this one now, the unknown. Okay, what's this one about? I think there's only really one way to explore the unknown, and that is to step into it. Step into it and then observe ourselves. So if we look at, for example, public speaking. So for a lot of people, there's a lot of fear around public speaking. In fact, some research says public speaking is our number one fear ahead of death. So it's basically saying some people would rather die than do a presentation. So again, fear is the key barrier here that might stop us from stepping into the unknown. But if we were willing to give things a go, give new things a go, first of all, what would that do for your development as a leader? And is it reasonable to expect a leader to do that? Is it reasonable to expect that, yeah, there are some things I'm going to have to try? If I want to grow, if I want to position myself in an organisation, if you are, aspiring to higher levels of management, for example, or position within an organisation, is this a space I've got to be willing to step into, give things a go? So might be doing those public speaking or presentations or more of them. By the way, expressing what's in here might have an element of unknown, right? So expressing my opinions, the actual act of doing it, might have an unknown element to it. Also, how can I prepare myself? Are there ways I can prepare myself to step into the unknown? So it's not necessarily just a jump into the deep end type of approach. Are there certain skills development exercises or programs I can do that can actually assist me in just building up my skill set so that I can give other things a go, right, and step into that unknown? But then also being prepared to seek feedback and perhaps express what's going on in here. So, for example, right, a person, again, might have taken on a leadership role. Hopefully they're getting some support from their manager, right? And the actual act of stepping into a leadership role might be unknown itself, right? But as soon as I step in there, I then give myself opportunities to build my awareness. Why? Because now, by stepping into the unknown, there's going to be aspects of myself which others will observe, right? So all of a sudden, by stepping into the unknown, I automatically move here or here, right? So as soon as I step in, there's going to be aspects to what I've just tried. So for example, if it was a presentation, which now get observed by others, right? I can now seek their feedback and say, how did I go? And what would you say I did well? What would you say I could improve on, for example? There will also be aspects to myself which will come in here. So as soon as I go and do a presentation, again, using that as an example, I might observe, I really felt my legs really going now. I've really got to work on that. Or my heart was beating at 100 miles an hour. How do I do that? How can I manage that? And perhaps I might find some ideas. It's about breathing, for example, or it's about relaxing before a presentation, or it's about doing some warm-up exercises with my jaw, for example, to help me relax. So as soon as I step into the unknown, I automatically give myself the opportunity to build awareness from blind spots that are observed by others, or from the hidden, from self-observation of myself, of course. So that's the Johari window in a nutshell. And again, just ask you to think about, as a leader who's developing their leadership skills, the value of seeking feedback, expressing what's in their hidden, finding ways to do it, and again, that might involve developing or jumping into the unknown, developing some skills around how to do that, but also finding opportunities to step into the unknown, just to try new things, right? Because the reality is, if I want to grow, I'm going to have to try new things. And as leaders, is it fair to say we have to be willing to grow? Now, if we stay stuck, what does that mean for our development? What does it also mean for our team? So food for thought, folks. Hope you found that valuable. If you've got any comments, feedback on this session, please jot them down below and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep informed of upcoming sessions. Thanks.